Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Dear students of second class, College of Medicine, University of Mosul. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is the third lecture in the embryology of GIT system. Liver. Look at this picture. The endoderm is derived from the zygote, and from the endoderm the foregut is formed. Then the foregut giving us the liver, hepatoblast, gallbladder and pancreas, and from the liver hepatoblast the hepatocytes and biliary epithelium is formed. From the mesoderm the hepatic mesenchyme is formed. Liver begins as ventral outgrowth or the verticulum from the ventral aspect of the caudal part of the foregut. It grows inside the ventral mesogastrium and divides into two buds with the stem or stalk. These buds are known as the pars hepatica, which forming the liver loop cranially, and pars cystica caudally, which forming the gallbladder and the cystic duct. The pars hepatica forming the liver loops, while the pars cystica forming the gallbladder and cystic duct. The cells of the liver are arranged in strands, which separated from each other by blood sinusoid, which is derived from mesoderm of septum transversum. The mesoderm is also responsible for the formation of stroma and capsule of the liver, while the Kupffer cells are derived from the mesenchyme. The connecting stalks forming the cystic duct, hepatic duct, which fuse to forming the common bile duct. Again, here is the liver bud, pars hepatica and pars cystica, forming the liver lobules and the gallbladder, and the cystic duct, and from the stalk is the common hepatic duct and cystic duct forming the common bile duct. Congenital anomalies of the liver. Here is an example of the congenital anomaly forming the radial loop of liver, tongue-like loop of the liver, while here is the supradiaphragmatic loop of the liver. Here is duplication of the gallbladder, and here is obliteration of the common bile duct, leading to distension of the hepatic duct. Well, what about the development of pancreas? Pancreas is formed by two pancreatic buds from the endodermal lining of the duodenum. These buds are one dorsal and one ventral. The dorsal pancreatic bud grows into the mesoduodenum and forming the tail and major part of the head of pancreas. The dorsal bud also gives the major part of main pancreatic duct and the accessory pancreatic duct. So here is the ventral bud and here is the dorsal bud. From the dorsal bud formation of the head and tail and the main pancreatic duct and accessory pancreatic duct. So we have three steps: formation, rotation, and diffusion. So formation of two buds, ventral and dorsal, and then rotation of the ventral to become enter the dorsal part of the pancreas, and then fusion of two buds here. The ventral pancreatic bud accompanies the hepatic diverticulum and forming the remaining part of the head of pancreas and the uncinate process. It also shares in the formation of the main pancreatic duct, which drains the rest of the head of pancreas and the uncinate process. The endodermal cell of the pancreatic bud forming the secreting acini that secretes the main pancreatic enzymes and the islet of Langerhans. What are the congenital anomalies of the pancreas? Number one, the pancreatic divisum. So there is a septum between the two pancreatic buds separated between them. Also, cystic fibrosis of pancreas results from congenital malformation leading to formation of very viscous pancreatic secretion as a result of the obstruction of the pancreatic duct. Number 3, ectopic pancreatic tissue may invade into pyloric area of the stomach called ectopic pancreas, and also may invade into the duodenum and the intestine. Annular pancreas, where is a ring of pancreatic tissue surrounding the whole circumference of the duodenum due to the abnormal migration of the pancreatic buds leading to forming what is called the annular pancreas. Well, what about the spleen? Spleen develops from the mesoderm in the dorsal mesogastrium, which become divided into gastrosplenic and lienorenal ligament as we discussed before. It first lobulated, but later the blood become confluent. The lobes become confluent together. So the presence of notch in the upper border of the adult spleen is an indication of earlier lobulation. What about the congenital anomalies of the spleen? Number 1, lobulated spleen due to the failure of lobe to become confluent together. So this is a picture of your lobulated spleen. Number 2, accessory spleenules. The embryological development of the duodenum. The cranial half of the duodenum is derived from the foregut, while the caudal part is derived from the midgut. So this explained the blood supply from the celiac trunk and superior mesenteric artery. It is at first has a dorsal mesentery known as mesoduodenum attached it into the posterior abdominal wall. As a result of rotation of the stomach, the duodenum comes to be to the right side and becomes C-shaped structure that loses its mesentery and become as retroperitoneal structure except its first 1 inch. Development of the midgut. The midgut grows faster than the vertebral column, so become U-shaped structure with inverted apex. This structure has a proximal or cranial limb and distal or caudal limb, with the superior mesenteric artery in between 2 limbs, while the apex is connected to the umbilicus by vitelline ligament. The derivatives of the midgut are small intestine, including most of the duodenum, the part caudal to the major duodenal papillae, cecum, appendix, ascending colon, and the right half or 2/3 of the transverse colon. All of these derivatives are supplied by superior mesenteric artery. The cranial limb giving to caudal part of the duodenum, ileum, while the caudal limb give rise to the terminal part of ileum, cecum and appendix, ascending colon, and right 2/3 of transverse colon. What about the rotation of the midgut? Midgut lobe has a cranial and caudal limbs. Midgut lobe rotates around the axis of the superior mesenteric artery. So this is the axis of the rotation, superior mesenteric artery. Midgut rotates firstly 90 degrees anti-clockwise rotation to bring the cranial limb to the right and caudal limb to the left during what is called the physiological umbilical hernia. The cranial limb midgut elongate to forming the intestinal coiled loop, which called jejunum and ileum. This rotation is counterclockwise and it is completed to 270 degrees after reduction of the hernia. So it is rotating about 180 degrees anti-clockwise. In this picture, we have the 3 stages of GIT development. Stage 1, extrusion of the gastrointestinal tract forming the physiological hernia, and beginning of anti-clockwise rotation. So the cranial become right and caudal become limb with elongation. And here is entry toward the abdomen. Extrusion. The U-shaped loop projects inside the umbilical cord to forming umbilical hernia of the fetus, which is physiological or normal feature between the week 6 to week 12 of intrauterine life. Such hernia is due to, number 1, inadequacy of abdominal cavity, which is largely occupied by, number 1, rapidly growing liver, number 2, large size mesonephron on each side of the vertebral column. The rotation of loop and reduction of hernia. Just before the reduction is started, the loop will rotate 90 degrees anti-clockwise, so the original cranial limb comes to the right, while the caudal distal limb comes to the left. Once reduction is starting, the loop will complete its rotation anti-clockwise to an angle of 270. So the original caudal limb comes to the right and superficial. Stage 3, here, finalization of the total 270-degree counterclockwise rotation of GIT with final elongation of the colon, causing descending of the cecum and fixation into right iliac fossa. By the end of the 12th week of development, the loop of intestine starts to return back to the abdominal cavity due to the following reasons. Number 1, regression of mesonephron, no more increase in the size of the liver, and increase in expansion of the abdominal cavity with increase in the length of the abdominal wall. So there is a reduction of the physiological hernia to return back into the abdominal cavity. In this picture, cranial or proximal limb and the caudal limb and starting to go inside the hernia. And here starting of the rotation, so the cranial become to the right and the caudal become to the left. And completion of rotation after returning to the abdominal cavity. And then finalization, elongation, and the final segment return to abdominal cavity is the cecum, become firstly under the liver and then fixed into the right iliac fossa as shown in this figure. Again, here is the U-shape loop, cephalic or proximal limb, caudal limb, and this is the apex to the vitelline duct. And then starting rotation, cecal bud here become right and superficial, and the small intestine become deeper. The cecum and appendix attached to its tip arising as conical diverticulum from the caudal limb close to the apex of the loop. That's to say, the point of attachment of vitelo-intestinal duct. Here is the appendix, and this is the cecum, near the attachment of the vitelline duct. The last segment to enter in the abdominal cavity is cecum, which comes to be superficial to the small intestine. So here is the subhepatic position and then descend in the right iliac fossa to become in the adult position and fixed. What are the congenital anomalies of the midgut? Incomplete reduction results to forming omphalocele, where the lobe trapped outside the abdominal cavity and covered only by amnion of the embryo, as shown in this figure and in this picture. Incomplete reduction may simply causing congenital umbilical hernia, which due to simple defect in the central part of the abdominal wall. Gastrocesis, loops of bowel extend through the closure defect in the ventral body wall and they are not covered by amnion as shown in this picture, all intestine outside the body. The midgut loop may rotate in opposite direction, I mean clockwise rotation, leading to forming reverse position of a duodenum and become superficial to the colon. Anti-clockwise rotation may be 90 degree only, lead to reverse position of the abdominal content called situs inversus. Subhepatic position of cecum, failure to descending into the right iliac fossa. so-called subhepatic position of the cecum and appendix. Various positions of the appendix. In about 50% cases, the appendix is retrocecal or retrocolic, as shown in this figure. So 50% is retrocecal appendix. What about the congenital anomalies of the ligaments? Number 1, Meckel's diverticulum, which is related to number 2. So it is measured 2 inches in the length, about 2 feet proximal to the ileocecal valve, and it's seen in 2% of population. Vitreointestinal fistula may appear and connect the intestine with the umbilicus and discharge some of the content to the umbilicus. The whole duct may persist and fibrosed, forming fibrosed cord extending from the umbilicus to the ileum. Part of the duct may persist and forming vitelline cysts along the course of the duct. So, the congenital anomalies of the ligament is Meckel's diverticulum, vitreointestinal fistula, fibrosed fistula, and vitelline cyst formation. That's all about the development of the liver, pancreas, midgut. Students, all of you are leaders of the society, so please ask the surrounding people to stay at home for their safety. Thank you for your listening.